Imagine spending months making sure that if you died, no one would ever know who you were. Not your name, not your face, not a single thread that led back to you. Now imagine you succeeded. On the morning of November 29th, 1970, a father and his two young daughters were hiking in a valley outside Bergen, Norway. Locals had an old name for the place. They called it Death Valley. They were about to find out why it still deserved it. The Isdal woman, the most careful disappearance in history. Isdalen, the ice valley, sits in the foothills of Ulriken, one of the 7 mountains that ring the city of Bergen. It's remote and it's old. In the Middle Ages, locals believed it was cursed. In more recent memory, it had simply become a place where hikers occasionally never came back. That reputation is exactly why, on that November morning, nobody expected to find what they found. One of the daughters wandered slightly off the path, drawn by a smell she couldn't place. What she found among the rocks was the body of a woman, badly burned, lying in a position investigators would later call almost theatrical, on her back, one arm raised, as if she'd been trying to hold something off. Bergen police arrived within hours. What they found around the body told them almost immediately that this wasn't a simple accident, and it wasn't a simple death. Scattered near her, an umbrella, empty bottles that had once held some kind of accelerant, a fur hat of a style almost never seen in Norway, more common 2,000 miles away in Soviet Central Asia. And every single label on her clothes, on everything around her, had been deliberately cut away. Someone had gone to enormous trouble to make sure that if this woman died, she would die as no one at all. The identification effort should have been simple. A woman roughly 25 to 40 years old, 5'4", dark hair, delicate features. In most missing person cases, someone comes forward within days. No one did. But as police widened their search, they found something almost stranger than the body itself. This woman had left a trail, just not one that led anywhere real. In the months before her death, she had stayed in hotels across the country. Bergen, Stavanger, Trondheim, Oslo, always registering under a different name. Fenella Lork, Vera Jarle, Claudia Nielsen. At least 8 aliases in total, each one slightly different, none of them real. She claimed every time to be from Belgium, but witnesses remembered her filling out the forms in German. Hotel staff described a woman fluent in several languages, with an accent nobody could quite place, sometimes guessed as French, sometimes Central European, sometimes something else entirely. The behavior investigators uncovered wasn't just secretive, it was disciplined. She paid only in cash. She frequently changed rooms, sometimes more than once in the same night. Staff recalled her wiping down surfaces after meals and removing her own fingerprints from glasses before she left a room. This is not what someone does when they're hiding from an angry husband or dodging a debt. This is what someone does when they've been trained to disappear. Roughly a week after the body was found, police got a call from Bergen's railway station. 2 suitcases had been sitting unclaimed in a locker for days. Inside, wigs, multiple sets of forged identity documents, each under a different name, foreign currency, cosmetics designed to alter her appearance, and tucked inside a pair of sunglasses, one clear fingerprint, the only physical trace of her identity she'd failed to erase. Investigators cross-referenced that fingerprint against every record they could access: Interpol, European police databases, missing person files across the continent. Nothing. Not one match anywhere. In an era before DNA sequencing, before facial recognition, before any of the tools we now take for granted, a woman had been erased so thoroughly that even her own fingerprint led nowhere. This was 1970. Norway sat on the front edge of the Cold War, a NATO member state bordering the Soviet Union, home to sensitive military installations along its coast. And as police dug further into her movements, an uncomfortable pattern started to form.
One witness reported seeing her near a naval defense district in Stavanger, apparently observing military activity. A classified file, later declassified, showed that a senior Norwegian defense official noted her movements lined up disturbingly well with the timing of top-secret missile trials being conducted in the area. Unknown to the Bergen police at the time, Norway's own intelligence service had quietly opened a parallel investigation of their own. None of this proves she was a spy. No intelligence agency, Norwegian or otherwise, has ever acknowledged any connection to her. But the pattern, the aliases, the tradecraft, the fluency in multiple languages, the proximity to military secrets is difficult to dismiss as coincidence. If she was an intelligence operative, she wasn't a clumsy one. She may have simply been better at her job than whoever eventually caught up with her. On December 21st, 1970, Bergen police closed the case. Their official conclusion? Suicide by self-immolation.
It was a conclusion that folded neatly into the physical evidence, the burns, the accelerant, the remote location, but it left almost everything else unexplained. Why would someone planning to end their own life spend months meticulously erasing every trace of their identity first? Why die in a location so remote it would delay discovery of the body for days? And why did a toxicology report later suggest she may have ingested a significant quantity of sleeping medication before the fire? The kind of detail more consistent with someone being restrained or already unconscious than someone acting entirely alone. The case was closed. The questions were not. On February 5th, 1971, she was buried in Bergen's Mullendal Cemetery, given Catholic rites because of the saints' names she'd used as aliases. Her funeral was attended only by police officers. Her coffin was made of zinc, specifically chosen so that if science ever caught up to the mystery, her body could still be exhumed and examined. It was, in its own way, an admission. The people who buried her already suspected this wasn't over.
They were right. In 2016, 46 years after her death, Norwegian broadcaster NRK reopened the case, this time with tools the original investigators could never have imagined. Researchers extracted isotopic data from her preserved teeth, able to trace the chemical fingerprint of the water and food she'd consumed as a child, a kind of biological map of where she'd actually grown up. The results? She likely spent her early childhood somewhere in Eastern or Central Europe, then moved west toward France sometime in adolescence, possibly during or just before the Second World War. Separate handwriting analysis supported the same conclusion. She had almost certainly learned to write in a French-speaking country. For the first time in nearly half a century, the fog around her had a shape. Then, in 2023, an independent researcher working from Swiss Federal Archive documents proposed a new and startling thread, one connecting the Isdal woman's final movements to a Swiss banker with alleged ties to Nazi-era financial networks. The theory remains unproven, but it's the closest anyone has come in 50 years to a name behind the fire. It's easy, telling a story like this, to get pulled entirely into the puzzle. The ciphers, the missile bases, the Cold War intrigue. It's the kind of mystery built for true crime forums and late-night rabbit holes. But somewhere underneath 50 years of theories is the fact that this was a person. Someone who was once a child in a specific country, who learned specific languages, who had, however briefly, a relationship
in the summer before her death with a man in a small French town who would later come forward, decades later, still remembering her. Whoever she really was, she spent her final months being extraordinarily careful, and she still ended up alone in a valley the locals had feared for centuries, with no one left to say her name.
Her DNA profile exists today, preserved, waiting. It's been checked against Interpol's database without a match. It has never been run against the commercial genealogy databases that have cracked open decades-old cold cases elsewhere in the world. Not yet, at least, due to legal and ethical restrictions in Norway. Which means somewhere, right now, there may be a family who has wondered for over 50 years what happened to a relative who simply never came home. Never knowing the answer might already be sitting, cataloged in a Norwegian archive. The Ice Valley kept its old reputation, but this time it didn't take a life. It just kept one, unnamed, a little longer than anyone thought possible. That's the thing about disappearances like this. History doesn't always hand you an ending. Sometimes the most careful person in the story is also the one we never get to know.
In your own opinion, what do you think happened to Isdal woman? Did she deliberately set herself ablaze, or did someone we'll never get to know did that to her? Every week, we go looking for stories like this one. Cold cases, forgotten history, disappearances no one ever explained. If that's the kind of stories that pull you in, hit subscribe. The next one's already waiting.